I'm Dr. Helen Gordon, Director of Palliative Care here at University of Maryland, St. Joseph Medical Center. I'm holding a very important piece of paper. It's called an advance directive, sometimes called a living will. These documents contain statements about the type of care that you would want if you weren't able to speak for yourself. It's recommended that everyone complete an advance directive, regardless of their health status, since it has important information about choices you would want made. It also includes the name of the person who can make choices for you in the event you can't speak for yourself. Advance directives are legal documents, but they don't need to be reviewed or signed by a lawyer. This is the state of Maryland's advance directive, which we'll review so you can have a better understanding of what this document does. One of the first things you must do is you select a surrogate decision maker. This is probably a term you aren't familiar with. It's also sometimes called a power of attorney for healthcare or a healthcare agent. This is not the same thing as a legal power of attorney. The surrogate decision maker is the person you select who can best say what you would want if you couldn't speak for yourself. For example, sometimes a fever or a complication from a treatment can make someone confused or disoriented. That is the person who is then called to give permission for procedures. Sometimes something more devastating happens, like a stroke, in which case that person would be asked to represent your wishes for the healthcare team. Just to clarify, this person makes no financial decisions and cannot write checks or pay bills and isn't financially responsible for anything. Generally, the surrogate decision maker is the next of kin. This could be a spouse, an adult child, or a parent or a sibling. It could be someone else you trust. Things to consider when making this choice are that person's health, their age, if they live far away, and whether this person will abide by your wishes. If you don't pick a surrogate decision maker, and at some point you need one, the state of Maryland determines who will be asked to make these surrogate decisions. The order in the state of Maryland is the guardian of the person if a court has had to appoint a guardian, but that's unusual. Second in line is the spouse. Third is adult children working together. Fourth is parents. Fifth is adult siblings. Sixth are other relatives or friends. Most of us want to make our own decisions about what happens to us, which is why having an advance directive and a chosen surrogate decision maker is so important. If you don't have an advance directive signed and in effect, or if you want to update one, you have the option of using the Maryland Advance Directive Planning for Future Healthcare Decisions form. It's free and it can be printed from the Attorney General of Maryland's website. This is the form we're reading from right now. There are also other forms available for end-of-life choices, such as one called the 5 Wishes, which are excellent, but they have a charge associated with them. Now, let's review the Maryland Advance Directive form page by page. Pages 1 and 2 are dedicated to recording the name and contact information of your healthcare agent, or the surrogate decision maker, and your backup agents. Page 3 provides a location for comments for your agent, including any conditions or limitations you might want to set, or advice about how your agent might decide specific issues, or who else they might want to consult, like a minister, a rabbi, a friend, or a child. Please note there's several places throughout this document where you can add thoughts. Page 4 discusses when your agent's power is in effect. It gives you an option to allow your surrogate decision maker to make decisions when needed because temporarily you can't speak for yourself, or to not allow decisions until you're permanently disabled. In my experience, it's usually best to allow your agent to help if you're temporarily disabled, which is the first choice on page 4. Pages 5 through 8, which is part 2, list your treatment preferences. It's the place to explain your general wishes to guide your medical team and your agent. Part 2 of the form doesn't have to be filled out, but it can be if you want to specifically direct your surrogate decision maker. Ultimately, you can choose to just name a surrogate decision maker, giving him or her authority to make decisions on your behalf, or clearly state your wishes in Part 2. If you state your wishes in Part 2, your surrogate decision maker, your healthcare agent, is expected to follow your preferences, either as written or with flexibility. Because it is impossible to know everything that might happen, often patients elect to give independent authority to their surrogate decision makers, as healthcare options can be very complicated. For example, some treatments may be very helpful in one situation and not in another. So the impact of specific treatments often can't be figured out fully in advance. Now I'm going to specifically discuss your election of wishes found in Part 2 on pages 5 through 8. Under the Statement of Goals and Values, you'll see a box which displays a space to write what's most important to you during the last part of your life. This can mean the last days or the last weeks and months. Often people will respond by indicating they want to have family present and around them. Another common statement is wanting comfort and peace at that time. Some people want to be home, and some want to be as independent as possible. Others want to be able to communicate as much as possible. Although this section can be left blank, it's a place to put your thoughts about what's most important to you. This can generally help guide your decision maker if they're called on to help. Next are sections B, C, and D, which ask what level of invasive procedure you would want in 3 different conditions. These conditions are terminal condition, persistent vegetative state, and end-stage condition. A terminal condition can be when cancer comes to the end stage, or when sepsis, a bacterial infection in the blood, is overwhelming. A persistent vegetative state is a form of severe brain damage from which people don't wake. An end-stage condition generally refers to the very late stages of many chronic diseases, like heart failure, lung disease, Parkinson's disease, or dementia. Terminal condition and end-stage conditions can refer to fairly similar processes. The 3 choices of invasive procedure for each condition are as follows. The first choice focuses on comfort and allows for a natural death when that time comes. The second choice also offers comfort and a natural death, but continues IV fluids and feeding tubes for fluid and nutrition even as the end approaches. Fluids and nutrition can be helpful for a period, but when someone can't eat or drink on their own, this prolongs the dying process. At the very end, fluids lead to shortness of breath because the lungs and bodies can't manage it. The third choice in sections B, C, and D is to extend life as long as possible with all available interventions. This generally means feeding tubes, but also breathing machines for extended periods. We have a lot of advanced and wonderful medical technology that can do a lot to restore health or help us get someone through a medical crisis. But there comes a time when this technology is not helpful for restoring health, and it gets in the way of comfort when someone is dying. There is another document in Maryland called a MOLST. In other states, it's often called a POLST. MOLST stands for Medical Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment, and it's not to be confused with an advance directive. An advance directive is your general wishes. A MOLST form translates someone's wishes into medical orders. Without the medical order to change the direction of care to comfort or limit interventions, everyone always receives full resuscitation efforts and all interventions possible in an urgency or emergency situation, like if you need to call 911. So a MOLST is needed in addition to an advance directive for many of us at some point in the progression of a chronic disease. There are just 2 pages left on this advance directive document, and the last page is just signatures. Section E on page 7 is a statement that says you would like pain relief no matter what. If that isn't the case, it can be crossed out or modified. Section F relates to women who are pregnant. In this case, it offers the opportunity to modify life-sustaining procedures as indicated. Section G gives 2 choices to your healthcare surrogate. This is what I mentioned earlier. The first choice gives the decision maker the option to be flexible with your wishes. The second says they should follow your preferences exactly as written, even if they think something else would be better. Ideally, you've picked someone who knows you well and who will act in your best interests using information from doctors, which is choice 1. It's important to note that any time medical staff need to discuss a healthcare procedure with a surrogate decision maker, we're always reminding them that the role of the surrogate is to choose what you think the patient would want, not what you want. Also, your decisions are not final. You can make changes any time to an advance directive by crossing out sections, initialing and dating them with witnesses present to sign that the changes were made by you. Or you can start over with a new document. We strongly recommend that you give a copy to everyone mentioned in your advance directive. And it's also a good idea to sit and talk with your surrogate decision maker and your loved ones about what you want and what you don't want. Letting family and friends know your end-of-life preferences is a gift to them. It may prevent family arguments and ultimately gives your loved ones the peace of mind that they're not forced to make a decision, but that they're respecting your wishes.